There's a startling idea quietly creeping back into modern philosophy. It's an idea so astonishing and so unanticipated that it can blindside a person the moment they hear it. It's the suggestion that consciousness, that deep, private, intimate spark inside every human being, is not some rare accident of biology, but rather a fundamental feature of reality itself. And it's not just in humans or animals. Some people believe there is consciousness in everything, including every atom, every electron, every quark, and every corner of the cosmos. This theory is called Panpsychism, and once someone hears it, they can't unhear it. It sticks to the mind like an animated cocklebur, whispering, "What if the universe is more alive than you ever imagined?" And the real shock is that this isn't fringe mysticism. This is a view taken seriously by some of the most respected philosophers and scientists alive today. Part 1. The question that science can't answer. Here's something most people never think about. Science is extraordinary at explaining how things work. It can map the human genome, predict the orbit of distant planets, and model the behavior of subatomic particles with breathtaking precision. But there is one question. One burning, dreadful, deeply uncomfortable question that science has never been able to answer. How do people experience something? Think about that for a second. When someone sees the colour red, there's a subjective experience happening. It's warm and vivid, and it means something. If you were to imagine a secret sun inside yourself connecting to everyone else's secret sun inside of them in a giant network, this is a subjective experience. But if a neuroscientist investigates your brain, they'll find neurons firing and they'll see electrical signals and chemistry. Nothing in there looks like the experience of red or the experience of a network of secret suns. Nothing in there looks like loneliness or joy or anxiety or the odd feeling of déjà vu. The philosopher David Chalmers called this the hard problem of consciousness. He didn't mean hard as in difficult, but hard as in possibly unsolvable with the tools we currently have. And the reason it's so distressing is that it exposes a crack in the very foundation of the current scientific worldview. How does non-conscious matter, including atoms, molecules, and electrical charges, create something as profound and intimate as your inner experience? Nobody has a good answer, and that's exactly where panpsychism steps forward. Part 2, the idea that rewrites everything. Panpsychism is the philosophical view that consciousness isn't something that magically materializes when matter gets complicated enough. Instead, consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality itself. It's woven into the fabric of everything that exists, from the largest galaxy clusters down to the smallest subatomic particle. According to panpsychism, electrons and quarks don't just have mass and charge, they have some infinitesimally small flicker of experience. Now, before you roll your eyes, and you should at least consider rolling your eyes, because this is a genuinely perplexing idea, it's worth understanding what panpsychism is not saying. It's not saying that a rock is sitting there contemplating the meaning of life or stressing over social media posts. It's not saying electrons have opinions. Philip Goff, one of the most prominent modern philosophers defending this view and author of Consciousness and Fundamental Reality, is careful to explain that simple matter has only the most rudimentary, bare traces of experience. Not thoughts and not desires, but just the faintest, most minimal flicker of something, rather than nothing. As complexity increases, as atoms form molecules, molecules form cells, and cells form nervous systems. That experience becomes richer, more unified, and more conscious. The universe, in this view, is not a dead machine grinding through meaningless physical processes. It is, in some astonishing and wondrous way, working its way through us. Part 3, this isn't new. Here's what's truly remarkable. Panpsychism isn't some fringe, newfangled philosophy invented by people who spend too much time meditating, hugging trees and eating tofu. Panpsychism has been quietly respected and discussed for centuries. Bertrand Russell, one of the sharpest, most rigorous analytical minds in the history of Western philosophy, hinted at panpsychism in his later works. Arthur Eddington, the physicist who confirmed Einstein's theory of general relativity, wrote that the stuff of the world might be mind stuff, suggesting a mental or spiritual nature behind physical reality rather than a purely mechanical one. Erwin Schrödinger, one of the founding fathers of quantum mechanics, was deeply aware of the relationship between consciousness and matter. Long before panpsychism had a name, the idea was already alive in the world. Indigenous cultures across every continent held animistic worldviews, including the deeply felt belief that everything, from rivers to rocks to the wind itself, carries some form of spirit or awareness. Baruch Spinoza, the radical 17th century Dutch philosopher, argued that mind and matter are not two separate things, but two expressions of a single infinite substance. and Eastern traditions from Hindu Vedanta to Buddhist philosophy have insisted for thousands of years that consciousness is not something the universe produces, but something the universe fundamentally is. These are examples of completely different traditions and completely different languages and frameworks, and yet all of them arrived somehow at the same stunning destination. Part 4. Why this is a personal problem. Now here is where this discussion stops being abstract. Here is where it becomes urgent. If panpsychism is even partially correct, consciousness is not a byproduct of a brain doing its mechanical job, but rather a fundamental feature of reality itself, then every dark night your soul spent wondering whether any of this means anything is built on a false premise. The terrifying modern mainstream story of science is this. A person is a biological accident. We are a brief, flaring arrangement of carbon and electricity in an indifferent, non-conscious universe. Our awareness will dissolve when our brain stops working. Nothing we experience is ultimately real in any deep sense. We are, at the end of the day, alone. This story produces a specific feeling of loneliness, like a ghost haunting a machine. But panpsychism offers something different, not as a comforting fairy tale, but as a serious philosophical alternative grounded in the same scientific data everyone else is using. It says that consciousness is not the exception, it is the rule. It is the ground floor of reality. And that means a person's inner life, their subjective experience of being them, is not some irrelevant side effect of evolution. It is part of the deep structure of the universe. And there's a reason this feels like it matters, because it does matter. Part 5. The combination problem. Now, voicing the obvious objection to panpsychism is only fair. If this theory is so compelling, why isn't everyone a panpsychist? The most serious challenge is what philosophers call the combination problem. If electrons and atoms have simple, minimal experiences, how do those micro-experiences combine to form the rich, unified and complex experience of a human being? How do trillions of tiny flickering experiences add up to someone reading these words, remembering their childhood and feeling the specific weight of grief or the specific warmth of hope? That's a real problem, and a genuinely confounding one. And panpsychists like Goff and Chalmers freely admit it. They don't have a complete answer yet, but here's the twist. Nor does anyone else. The mainstream view that consciousness somehow emerges from non-conscious matter through purely physical processes is not a real answer either. It just hides the mystery behind words like emergence and hopes nobody looks too closely. At least panpsychism is truthful about where the mystery lives. That kind of intellectual honesty is rarer than it should be. Part 6. A universe that is not indifferent. There's a variation of panpsychism called cosmopsychism. This is the breathtaking, almost incomprehensible idea that the entire universe is itself a conscious entity and that individual human minds are expressions of that larger cosmic awareness. If someone allows themselves to sit with that, not to accept it uncritically, but to genuinely feel the implications, something shifts. The universe is no longer a cold, indifferent stage on which a brief, meaningless drama plays out. It becomes something more like a vast, ancient, awake presence, of which every person is an irreplaceable part. Schrödinger himself wrote that consciousness is a singular phenomenon. He said that there is, in some deep sense, only one consciousness, looking at itself through billions of pairs of eyes. Every moment of human connection, every flash of genuine meaning, is the universe recognizing itself. Part 7. What do you do with this? So, what does someone actually do with the idea of panpsychism? You don't need to become a philosopher, you don't need to change your religion or abandon your science. What you can do, what this extraordinary eye-opening idea invites everyone to do, is to peer into their own inner life more closely. You can look at another person, any person, even a stranger on a bus, and recognize that behind those eyes is the same inexplicable, miraculous and singular phenomenon of experience and awareness. And you can sit with the profound, staggering, almost unbearable beauty of the fact that you are not a ghost in a machine. You are the machine waking up. You are the universe becoming aware of its own existence. That is not a small thing. That is everything. Part 8. Consciousness doesn't end. Panpsychism doesn't answer every question as no philosophy does, but it does something arguably more important in that it changes the kind of questions someone asks. Instead of asking, why do I feel so meaningless in a universe that doesn't care? We start asking, what does it mean that I am part of a universe that has always, at every level, been oriented toward experience and awareness? This shift is not trivial. This shift is the difference between a life lived in quiet desperation and a life lived in genuine, grounded wonder. And wonder, as the philosopher Aristotle said, is the beginning of all wisdom.